to another episode of your favorite cricketing podcast in South Africa, the Full Quota podcast. My name is Mpho. I've got Tim Delace with me, and we're going to be doing a season review. But before we do that, please remember you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, One World Sports Radio YouTube channel. You can also support us on patreon.com at One World SR. Please do follow us on Twitter at One World SR. Also, YouTube as well as Facebook. We're live on all three platforms. Send through your comments because today we're going to be doing the 2021-22 South African cricket season review. We're going to do Proteas. We're also going to look at the domestic side as well. So before we even get on the road, let's talk to Tim. Tim, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, thanks. I'm doing good. The end of a very busy and congested season, but it's good.
I won't lie, this is like my first full proper season of doing podcasting and commentary and everything else, and it's taken a massive toll on me. I need a bit of a break, but I don't think I'll get that because it's going to be, you've got other things on the go. So Tim, we're doing this review, right? And so let's start with the Proteas, right? The Proteas started their season with the World Cup, and that's where we're starting, the World Cup, and we're ending it with Bangladesh. They went through the World Cup. They got knocked out on net run rate, which I don't think is an achievement, but hey, if you want to take whatever you want to take, you can take out of it. But what I saw was an improvement in the T20 skill and ability of the national side. They moved on to Netherlands. That was cancelled. That was one game rained out, no result, which didn't help our Super League due to Omicron. The India series was affected by Omicron, but they played 6 games, 3 ODIs, 3 tests. They won 5, 2 tests, and 3 ODIs, and they lost 1, which is the first game of the series, which precipitated a pattern that we didn't necessarily like. With South Africa losing the first game. Then we moved on to New Zealand. We lost the first game heavily, the test match heavily, but we won the second one to come back. That was a 1-1. And then we lost the ODI series to Bangladesh to close out our summer, but then we ended up beating Bangladesh, whitewashing them in the test series. Where would you characterize this season for South African cricket, taking into account all the results that have happened?
I think it has to be more positive than negative. It's easy to be negative. It's easy to be particularly with what's happened off the field, which we won't get going to. But I think there's been definitely more positives overall. As you said, there were good performances in the T20 setup. The skill level was better. Perhaps the application of certain match situations was not quite where we wanted to be, but overall there were definitely more positives than negatives. I think the test team definitely moved forward. I think the test team moved forward quite a few steps in this last summer. I think the way they played the important periods of that Indian series in particular was crucial. They were under pressure at different times. We could say India were not at their best. That's true. But when it counted, South Africa did answer the call. They answered the call against the number 1 test side of the world, and they're not test championship holders, but the best in the world by most people's estimation. And then when there were going to be lots of questions asked for the Bangladesh series, lots of players missing, particularly in their batting, I think they answered the call in the majority. I think there were individuals there that said, you know what, my position, I want to take it. If you just take, I'm just going to take a small example of Cyril. Okay, numbers were not great. His average is not great. But the importance of his opening stance with Argyle created the foundation for South Africa to score runs. He didn't have Keegan Peterson Bavuma coming in at 10 for 1. So So you already have an
Yes.
open partnership who have a good understanding of each other. They got them off to several 50-run partnerships, even a 100-run partnership at one stage. So there definitely were more positives. And then at the back end, of course, the spin twins. I think most people at the beginning of the season, if you said Maharaj and Sarat Harma are going to be dominating Bangladesh at the end of South African summer, you would have said, no, not a chance. Not a chance. It'll be the South African paces, even with the venues that they were, you would have thought that it would have been South African paces, whoever they were going to be. So that's a huge plus, and it's created a headache for the selectors going forward in terms of team composition. The area of concern, and huge concern, is the one-day setup. I don't think the one-day setup is not clicking at the moment. It's not playing the right sort of cricket that we want to be playing. It's playing cricket that is a little bit old style, back in sort of 10 years ago. It's disjointed, and it's not. There is a reason why South Africa might not qualify outright. There is a reason why South Africa have to win in the next series against England, and probably
Well, the next two. You need 60 points.
probably
You get to 100.
probably against India as well. So, and there are obvious concerns there. I think that there were issues with the 11 in certain series. I think the obsession with having a pace bowling all-rounder actually flummoxed them, because none of them actually really made it count. They want to have that guy in that upper seven to gel the guys together, the top six, the tail, but it doesn't work. When you've got people like Lippa, Muthusamy scoring runs, having very good seasons this year, backing up their previous season's form, you have to say maybe we have to rethink about the 11 with
But
the one-day setup. But I think overall, it's definitely more positive than negative.
look, I think from my end, I tend to agree with you. I think the test side has improved a lot. I think when we started the season, we were worried about the batting, but they batted better than a poor India, which isn't much, but it was something. And I think the bowlers were always consistently helping the team get out of some sticky situations. I think that New Zealand game where they didn't arrive, that was an anomaly, and it was a shocker, but it was a good shock to the system. And largely because and for me, my big theme with South Africa is preparation. I found this team at times unprepared, and they've always had to backtrack to try and clear out to try and clear their embarrassment, or to save themselves from embarrassment, and they've done that really well. And if it's the character of the coach, that this is the character of the coach to kind of fight back and do that. But I'd love for them to play front foot cricket. I'd love for them to come into, and that's my whole thing. If I look at the thread of this team, is this team didn't take their opportunities when they were handed to them. They arrived in for series unprepared, and I don't know why. The World Cup, I'm angry about the World Cup, the T20 World Cup, even though there was an improvement, largely because you faced Australia at their weakest, but you couldn't necessarily slay the dragon or beat them. You miscalculated on the amount of runs you thought you needed, which, based on history, I don't understand how they got to that number in the first place. Over and above the whole Bangladesh thingy, which I don't take any credence of. The other thing for me is the test side. India series, they arrived undercooked. You can't do that. You can't arrive undercooked at New Zealand. Yes, we'll say it's a MIQ and everything else, but you know this. You've been through COVID. You know, you can't 18 months after COVID stand there and still complain that you were quarantining for too long. That doesn't make sense to me. And yes, you can say Bangladesh beat New Zealand because the New Zealand guys are MIQing. That's an excuse for New Zealand not to actually look deep into what the actual issue is for this team. but there was an improvement. There was a massive improvement going through. There are a couple of embarrassments, and I don't know where to place this in terms of the entire thing. But as you mentioned, the ODI setup does need a relook. I don't get why at the end of the season we see the emergence of Keshav Maharaj on the side when as the frontline spinner, when Jabray Shamsi is your frontline spinner. And that also speaks to that all-rounder situation, right? If you have a spin bowling all-rounder at 7, who can bat? We've seen Keshav can bat, right? At 7, but I think 7 is too high for Keshav. It might mean dropping Keshav and bringing in Senran Mutusami or Vian Libba, who has the highest strike rate of a Mark in a Mark Boucher era in T20s. But that's where my issue is that I think in the ODI setup they are a little bit befuddled. That's the word. They are befuddled. They don't know what their best 11 is. Well, they had their best 11. They've moved away from it, largely because they're wanting to bring in. They've made a vice captaincy pick, which is great on paper, but on the field doesn't make sense because it actually weakens the side, because you're not taking wickets in those middle overs. You've got a guy who holds up an end. And yes, you want to slow games down, but the best way to slow games down is to take wickets, and that's what Tabrez is. T20 wise, yeah, we saw improvements. We want them to improve a lot more going into Australia, and I'm happy, and I think from 2 out of the 3 parts of the game, South Africa was good. Test match and T20, I say they were better than the expectations we had. The ODI setup, Mudimu, is really bad. And something needs to change from a batting. The balance in the batting is off. The balance in the bowling is off. And obviously the injuries didn't help. But for me, that's where I think South Africa needs to rethink. And depending on who they select as coach going forward and who the director of cricket will be, maybe that person may come in and change it. But let's have a couple of 3 comments from Jacobite that I'd like us to look at. They say that only 1 test match was a shocker out of 7, which I agree. They drew with the champions and they beat the runners-up, mopped the floor with a smaller team, and beat West Indies comfortably. I remember that West Indies series, but that was in the old test, World Test Championship. They also say, I can't remember a time when SA cricket didn't start slow in ODIs. Yes, but my thing is that we can't use that as a crutch or as an excuse.
Yeah.
You must always be prepared. You can't arrive at an exam and know that, oh no, question 1's going to smack me. Why don't you prepare better for question 1? And that's my only issue, because you get yourself in these holes where you're digging yourself out when you could have actually won the series in the first place. Like, for instance, the Bangladesh first ODI. I don't understand how we let that game slip away from us. And so for me, those are the small things, and that's why I'm sitting and going, fine, if you want to continue with Mark Boucher, continue with him, but this is what you're going to get. You're not going to win tournaments. That's for sure, because there's a lack of preparation coming into series and tournaments. So I don't expect a team that loses the first game of the tournament to win the tournament. So that's where I'm at right now with this side. And then obviously, so he says, so I don't think it's an excuse. I think it's a problem that they've always had. No idea why, but prepare better. We sat here in the preview of the World Cup and we said, these are the 2 games you needed to win. We didn't care about England at the end. It was the first 2 games, because that was Australia, it was West Indies. If you got through those, your tournament is set, because then you don't have to worry about, you can lose to England and still make it in because you'll beat the other 2, which they ended up doing. So for me, it's a change in mindset. It's a change in the way we prepare, because they keep on saying, I don't know why we start so slowly. I'll tell you why. You don't want to go there. You don't prepare properly. You don't plan well for your opponents. You just assume that, no, coming in, this is what it is. And maybe it's a lack of an analyst. Maybe it's a lack of, as you say, we're working with what we've done in previous decades when we're playing the style of cricket and ODIs the way we've done it in the previous decade or the past 5 years. Maybe that needs to change. Maybe having an analyst inside there, maybe having a proper batting coach inside there. I'm not saying Justin Salmons isn't. They try to fix it, and I'm happy that he's there, because he needs to. But the majority of the season we didn't have a batting coach, so maybe it is that. Maybe it's going and saying, okay, fine. What does Prasanna say? Pisana used to tell me what the thing was, and he was most times correct. Let's go with that, and maybe do that a little bit more. One other thing, Tim, I want to ask you. Um, Obviously, the Mark Boucher question is one of them, but on top of that, from a player development, which players actually grew in their development and which players actually decreased in their development at a national team level?
That's true. Yeah, I think you have to say Ryan stood up.
Which Ryan?
Although
Wimbledon.
Ryan Rickleton. I think
But he only
Rickleton.
had 2 games
Yeah,
at
but
the
he,
end.
he showed that he belongs in the setup. He didn't pull back.
Mm,
Didn't crawl into a shell. He played his natural game. Yes, it came up a cropper in his dismissals, but that is the way that you want him to play for South
mm,
Africa. You want him to be doing that. You want him to be playing positive attacking cricket within the setup, because that's where you're going to get the best out of him. You're not going to get the best
mm,
out of him playing a solo. He's not going to be doing that. He's going to be playing, attacking, attacking the
mm.
opposition. Um, in terms of everybody else, um,
Surely
I
Marco
think
Jansen.
yeah, obviously Marco, huge. You knew the talent. Again,
Mm,
he's taken to international cricket like Dr. Water. Um, you could see him actually playing all three formats. I'm not
mm,
necessarily wanting him to play all three formats now. I want him to ease his way in, but in terms of talent-wise, you really could see that
mm,
happening. Um, and in terms of regression, well, it's not really regression because he's been hanging around the team for ages, but not really playing in Vuon Mulder. Okay, so he had a
mm.
nice couple of second innings here against Bangladesh, but I still think there's a lot that needs to click for him to get a long-term selection in the T20
I'm still
setup.
saying Vian shouldn't be playing. Um,
He
Vian
shouldn't be
shouldn't be
playing.
playing
No, even
at
even
right now.
yeah, even with the runs and the wickets that he got,
Mm,
he shouldn't be. It's nice to see, but he should go back. He should go and have fun at Leicestershire, enjoy himself, have a
mm,
good long season there. His
yeah.
and then that's pretty much it. I don't think the only guys that we will get into the back end of the show, only guys that regressed were the guys that were in that SAA setup, in my opinion. The guys that were in the SAA setup scored runs, got wickets, and that was in October, November time.
Mm.
They had a full season ahead of them, and the majority
Let's
was
talk
not.
about those guys right now. I'll tell you who I thought improved, but let's talk about that SAA group.
Okay, so obviously Tony definitely put his hand
Mm,
up. In all three formats. He's also been captain for the provinces in one of the formats as well. Um,
mm-hmm,
so he's really come up in leaps and bounds, which is really good to see. Still think there's room for improvement in the red ball stuff, but in terms of the white ball, I've been
mm,
really impressed. Um, and then Clinton Sturman didn't play an awful lot, but when he did play, particularly in the longer formats, he answered. Average of 21
mm-hmm,
for the Warriors, showing that
mm,
he's still, he's the next best, if you like. Um,
yeah.
so in terms of the guys that regressed, they regressed massively. It's Michael Patoris, working with Alan Donald, I thought this was going to be the perfect
But that
partnership.
night setup has been bad though. It hasn't
No,
been
I know,
great.
and I'm not blaming Donald
Mm,
alone in this criticism. But the fact is, he averaged 40 with the ball, and in no
mm,
formats did he find any form, any. He was a big hitter. He's scored runs in the CPL in the West Indies, but he
mm,
got a poor season all round. It has to be said. Um, And then for Tonda, again, he's been doing exactly what he's been doing the last couple of years. Scoring runs
Mm,
at Plum and not scoring elsewhere. Until he scores runs elsewhere, the best
mm,
he's going to get is SAA. And at this point, if an SAA tour was happening now, I would be picking him. Talent only gets you so far.
mm,
The other one is my favorite, Jason Smith. Jason Smith started the season so well. Started the season well, was averaged
mm,
58 in the 4-day stuff, but the rest of the season, the rest of
mm,
the competition didn't answer the call, didn't put his name forward at the Dolphins. Particularly in the last couple of months, form fell off the cliff. So that was really for a guy that I genuinely still believe has the all-round game for the next level.
mm,
I was overall disappointed with this season.
mm. Okay. Okay, so from my end, I think the players, I'll talk about the players in the national setup. I agree with you on a lot of the guys in the SAA, that level below. But from a national team setup, Temba, Dean really took a step up across all three formats. Well, for Temba, but from a batting perspective and a leadership perspective, they took that step up and they need to be honored for that. They were really great as captains. Dean has this aggressive streak to him, which I kind of like, but I actually kind of don't like because I'm not too ultra aggressive. I don't like too ultra aggressive captains, but he was that guy, and his ability to be able to trust his gut is something that I'm excited to see how he's going to do in England, because that's going to be quite interesting to see, even with the selections. Do you go with the spin twins or do you go 4-1? So that's the type of stuff I'm excited to see. Timber, it's a purple patch. Keegan Peterson, from what I saw in in West Indies to now, proper number 3, great, glad to have him in. So to Sarlo, he took his opportunity. I shouldn't be seeing Aiden Markham anytime soon in the side. Thankful for that. Sarlo needs to be given a run in the side for this next Test Championship, because him and Dean, 1 in every 2 innings, they score a 50-run partnership. That's what you
Yeah,
want.
yeah,
And so that's the thing. And then I think a regression standpoint, I think Rassi regressed in the test arena. Also, I think Aiden regressed, and that's why there are questions around their place. And the one dropped, the other one has a last chance in England essentially. But from an ODI perspective, Rassi's just been the same, which has been amazing. The other, then obviously looking at the bowlers, Vian's regressed. I'm sorry, guys. Like Vian Mulder has regressed in his development. It hasn't suited him at all. And he's not there as a bowler. A lot of people are like, no, he's there as a bowler. No, he's not. He's there as a batsman, a number 7 batsman who's going to give you 10 overs of bowling. That's who he is. He's a batter. He's not a bowler. Yes, you're using his bowling to get him into the side, to give him some confidence, and he bowls really well. And he's the guy I want at number 7. But you're not going to score me runs. Go back home and sit down, because there's nothing I can do to help you. Marco Janssen's actually giving me what I need from a runs perspective compared to you. The other, I think, from a bowling perspective, I think Lungi's is a little bit of a question mark. I think he may have regressed in his bowling across all 3 formats, largely because of injury and the lack of playing, because the whole subcontinental tour just didn't work out, and the World Cup just wasn't. I just sat there going, no, this is not going to work. And IPL doesn't get anything anyway. Anuf Nokir's injury is the question mark for me. Kagiso also regressed. He's shown us glimpses of what he's capable of, but hasn't. So for me, that's where I'm at with this Proteas side. Next season, we need to step up. Next season, when we sit here next season, we should have qualified for the World Test Championship final. That's my thing. That's my expectation, Tim. It's my final point on the Proteas before we go to domestic. World Test Championship final, we should have qualified for the World Cup, even though we should. There's no
yeah,
excuse. There shouldn't
yeah,
be an excuse, And that World Cup, get to the semi-final. You've told us that you can compete with the best. Get to a World Cup semi-final and take a shot, take a massive shot
mm,
at that final, right? Regardless of who the coach is, the off-field stuff for me doesn't. I don't care, because the off-field stuff were created by Mark. essentially. So Paul Adams, Paul just spoke the truth. Mark just doesn't know how to apologize. And Graham doesn't know how to run operations, how governance works. So I'm not talking off-field issues. I don't like if Mark loses this job, it wasn't CSA's fault. It was Mark's fault because he does not understand how South Africa works in 2022, and he's not sympathetic to the plight of black people, and that's largely what it is. That apology was just ridiculous. I was like, dude, you don't get it, you don't see it, and so how can we trust you with our team when you don't see us completely? Because it was an excuse, it was riddled, it was blaming everybody, it was blaming everyone. And I want a coach who takes accountability for his actions and who owns it without saying, no, but we weren't taught. Just say, I'm sorry, and that's it. If he just said he was sorry for what he's done, it's inexcusable, that's it. Don't say, but we weren't taught, I was 19. We don't want excuses because that just kind of tempers, like it lowers down the excuse. It lowers down the apology. It's like, oh no, but you weren't yourself. That doesn't matter. A hurt occurred. Apologize for the hurt. And so that's where I'm sitting there going, Mark's done a great job. I'll give him that. This season, he's done an incredible job with his team. But the off-field stuff taints everything.
Which is why the director of cricket appointment is going to be so crucial going forward. Because as much as the off-field issues are there, if I'm a player, I don't want them there. It doesn't matter how small they're there. If I go onto Twitter, it's there. If I read the paper, it's there. If I talk to a friend who's heard a rumor that this is happening, it's there. I want to be able to focus 100% on playing my cricket. And if they are, it doesn't matter what it is. If there are off-field issues like there have been for the last 12 months still there, it puts the South African national team at a disadvantage. That's just the fact. Some players will not think about it, but others will. It will be affected. We are all very different. So if I was a betting man right now, I would say Mark is going to resign. I'm not basing that on anything that I've heard. I'm not basing that on anything that I've read. That's just my personal opinion. He's going to resign before that English tour. But we'll have to wait and see on that one.
Yes, and that's fine too. And in that case, if he wants to go, that's fine. But if he wants to clear his name, he can. He's got all this money to do that. Happy to do that.
Oh, but he'll do that. He'll do that. It'll be after the hearing. After the hearing, I think he'll be cleared, and then he'll go, you know what?
Yeah.
I don't
and
want
this,
to hang
this
around.
excuse of and this excuse of him wanting to reach out to Paul Adams to go and have a chat, that's not it. That's not how you apologize, especially on matters where the person's a victim. That person, the victim, needs to, well, I don't want to call Paul Adams a victim, but in this context, he is. He needs to then say if he's comfortable to do it. It's not I've tried to reach out. When you've hurt me, I have a right not to answer your phone call. I have a right not to see you, not to want to see you. You can't orchestrate that. So this thing of no, but Paul doesn't want, no. It's not, that's not how it works. You just apologize and say you're sorry. That's it. Paul can read it, he can do whatever he wants to. If he does not acknowledge it, he does not acknowledge it. But this whole little debacle shows me of a man who does not understand the fundamental tenets of human interaction. And on top of that, racial interaction in South Africa. Because it doesn't matter it was 20 years ago, and whether at the time Paul was laughing at it. If 5 years, if tomorrow Paul realizes that was a bad thing that they did, and even though at the time he was laughing at it, it's still wrong. And it's still hurtful. So for me, that's where I stand with the guy. If he wants to continue, he can. He must just be comfortable to continue under a director of cricket that is not his friend, which I'm happy about, actually. I'm more than that, because that's optimal hiring. That is what I want. I want CSA to hire optimally. So I love that they hired Graham. I was okay with that. It was a little bit too expensive, but it was fine. He did a good job. But I just needed him to prove to us and the rest of the world that Mark was the best candidate by proving why he was better than everybody else that he looked. Not just because we were in a rush to get to England. We just had to appoint Mark. Big difference, massive difference. One has a process, one does not, and one looks bad, one looks good, and can hold up against in the court of public opinion as well as in governance circles. So that's where I'm at. But actually, let's stop there. Let's talk domestic cricket. 4 trophies up for grabs. 2 T20 trophies. Graham, you took away MSL, dude. Come on, that's a big red. That's a big F for you there, right there. We wanted MSL back. 2 T20 trophies. One with all the provinces. First one was won by the Knights. It was the Riley Rousseau show. The return of the Colpacks, Wayne Parnell. We saw Les Deploy at the back end of the tournament, but it was a good tournament. What did you make of that tournament? Anybody stood out for you in that tournament, team, Tim?
I think it's difficult to judge the 2 T20 competitions, but arguably, I think that one was better. I think the standard of cricket was better. I thought it was more intense. And in terms, it's quite difficult to go back and see who remind ourselves to go back and look beyond the Riley Rousseau show, because Riley just in every single game dominated. It didn't matter what team, who was bowling, who it was, what the situation was. There were a couple of games where arguably the Knights probably should have lost, but he was on another level. So it was a good tournament. It was good that it was crossovers. That was the thing. To have the crossovers from divisions was huge, because you had several good Division 2 players playing in Division 2 who could be playing Division 1 next year. As you mentioned, Lewis Deploy won, Evan Jones. I won't go into too many names, but there's a couple there. And so it was good. You want to be able to see what you don't want to have going forward. You don't want to have a bridge. You want the two together. You want, you said this before, we want 1 and 2 as close together as possible. I'm a bit worried going forward that Cricket South Africa is not going to be aware of that. It's gonna leave 2 out on its own to look after itself and end up being. I just hope not. I hope I'm wrong. But in terms of intensity, in terms of play, good tournament all around, and the Riley Rousseau show won. The Knights were the winners purely on Rousseau's expertise.
That was just so good. He showed a difference, and I would have loved to see guys like Colin Ingram come back too, as well, to just strengthen the level of T20 competition in the country. Because like Colin Ingram's a T20 mercenary, we've seen him around the country, and just around the world. And I just would have thought, having those guys come back would have been great. Would have actually strengthened, like Colin going to the Warriors to do something and stuff like that. Any youngsters in that competition? Oh, we spoke about them, so we're not going to do that. Next competition, I'm going to do the T20, the one this year. This was the rise of Tristan Stubbs. This was the stubby. This was it. And we really enjoyed that. They didn't get over the line because there was for me, I kind of felt like the Titans and Western Province just got better and better and better. We saw Richard Levy come back, which was weird. But there was a kid there, Junaid Dawood, that leg spinner. My word. We need him. We need to protect him with everything we have. We need to send him on whatever spin camps we need to, but I'm happy for that. How did you make of that T20 tournament, especially after having a look at the first one, because the second one was just 8 teams? How did you see that one?
It was just obviously, as you say, just the Division 1 sides. Look, it was again a good competition, but this one made me think of MSR. This one, we said, we had the crossovers, great. This one, I just kept thinking, this should be MSL. This should be MSL with Colin Ingram, David Visser, David Bertium, couple of guys coming over and implementing it. That would have been fantastic. It would be outstanding. So there was a lingering sort of, well, we've already had one. Would we really need this one? Again, great games. There were some really, really, really quality games throughout the competition. My word, the Lions weren't at their best. But I think again, it was just the strength of the Titans. The Titans unit. It doesn't really matter who they lose, who moves on. Their togetherness is so strong. Their setup, their grassroots is clearly so strong. The other thing, as you mentioned, is Providence. I like what's happening at Providence at the moment. They are a lot of youngsters just coming through. Daniel Smith, Grant Kaplan, David, really good youngsters coming through. So it was good, but I just kept thinking, this is where MSL belongs, right here.
So we've got some comments here. Got some comments here from Jacobite, who just keeps on sending them through to us. He was like, damn, Parnell's ODI bowling looked good before the injury. Yes. Well, yeah, he took a wicket, then he pulled up, so that was fun. And then here's the next one for you. Surely if Harmer gets into the test squad, Riley gets into the ODI squad.
Not happening. Not happening.
Why
I would
isn't
love
it
it to
happening?
happen.
Why not?
I would.
Let Aiden out of there.
One day setup needs X Factor players. Riley's an X Factor player. I don't see it happening. There's so much bad blood. That's why I could be wrong. I just don't see it happening.
Okay, cool. No problem. And then the next one, because I said just take Aiden out. And the next one, I'm saying it must have been financial issues regarding MSL. I can't see any other reason of not having the league.
Yes.
It is. But remember, they told us that the previous CEO was running it at a loss. So I don't get how, because he was running it at a loss, they couldn't fix it, because that's the reason why they were there. While Graham was there, was to get all the sponsors back on board, because he's got this extensive network around the world. He's loved by India. He's loved by the world. Why couldn't he get this working? I understand Omicron was a big thing, and I'll give him that. But at least because we were supposed to have a draft in November. It never happened. We're supposed to already have things on the go before they canceled it in December, because in January, actually, once we had already passed the initial Omicron phase. So I do agree. It was financial, but that just sits with Graham Smith. The last two tournaments, I want to talk about the One Day Cup, and then we'll talk about the 4-day series. One Day Cup was truly amazing for me. I enjoyed it, watching the Lions win it. But the Lions team, and the Lions team for me, and it's hard for this season because you kind of have to pick a squad of about 15 to 20 who of 15 to 20 who have to cover you across all three formats. And we saw that with the Lions side. They were really good at Red Ball. They were really horrible at T20. So I just assumed because they were horrible at T20, they'd be very, very bad in the ODIs. But then step up Sisanda Magala, who gave us a show. In the final, he didn't do anything. But him and Mitch van Buren, who I think is the standout superstar of that tournament, came through and took the Lions forward. Other notable performances from me: Spinello Makanya as captain of the Titans, really great captaincy. Heinrich Klaassen with those massive hundreds. Dennis the Brain as well coming through. Senran Mutusami at Northwest. And so for me, I was really excited to see those guys, especially Makanya. I think the way Makanya plays the game with that intensity, That's an international level intensity, and he should get a look in even at that Proteas side, maybe even as a Miller replacement, because I think he does a really good job in that in that middle order. How did you see this tournament? And yeah, who were the standouts for you?
Yeah, look, it was probably the best white ball domestic tournament of the year for us. I think in terms of stand, in terms of how people played, um, I really thought that the battle between the Lions and the Titans throughout the season, when you beat them by 1 wicket early on, and then you beat them again in the final. I thought those were both outstanding games, really high quality games,
Mm,
um, hugely impressive. Um, but again, as you mentioned, since Makanya, a lot of talk about the lack of
mm,
Black African players. Actually,
mm.
there are actually a few. There are actually a few. So you've got
Kazandu's had a great season across all three formats.
you got your Toba, you got your
Mm.
Kazondo, you got your Lasipa Nkopi at the Warriors, and you got
Yeah,
Simpson Kanye at the Titans. All of them, in my opinion, could be playing a game or two for the Proteas. All of them have the ability. All of them had good seasons. All of them have
mm.
genuine ability to
And
bat.
and and Tim, the next level below them, Tebang Ditole of KZN England, Andile Mokhakane, the Sheila, I'll put him in there because he just needs a change of thingies. We saw Andile Petluguayo in score hundreds as well from a batting perspective. There's options. Grant McGuena also had a great
There's
4 day series.
no, yeah,
And would obviously he's an opener, so there's a lot more to fight for there.
yeah.
There are quite a lot of options there. Obviously, Wandile Makwetu, he I think needs a change of scenery, but he's not. I wouldn't
And
put him in that level yet, but watch out.
yeah. He is getting a change of scenery, by the way. He's
Oh
one of
yes.
the many
Oh,
that's
we'll
leaving.
talk about all of those. But let's get through. Let's get through 4 day series. 4 day series, right? This was the fun one. Lions leading for half the half the tournament. I remember I sat on this podcast and said, "No one's catching this team. Give us the trophy now." And as a I don't know, it's a cross, or it's a I don't know, it's a burden of success. Actually, let's say that as a burden of that success, Duan Olivier was taken out the side for the final few games because he had to go play for the Proteas. 27 wickets in 4 matches. That was a record. He went up there. Lucho Supamna went to SAA, ended up at the Proteas while they were in New Zealand. He couldn't finish up. He was the number 2 wicket taker at the Lions in that series. Sisana Magala spent some of those games as well in the India series as part of the Proteas test setup and ODI setup. So he couldn't finish. That was all 3 of their frontline bowlers, which left them with Malusi Siboto and having them to bring in some other youngsters, which necessarily didn't work for them. But Tim, the Titans, we've had Neil Brunt here. We spoke with Neil Brunt. He thought the title was over, but it wasn't. And they came through, largely on the back of your friend, Simon Harmer. How did the Titans end up doing it? Who else outside of this axis stood out for you? I know Othniel Bartman stood out for me. That Lisiba Mwepe had a
I think
great 4 day series. So did Matthew Bretska, actually, who put up his hand as a red ball cricketer.
the other chap and the guy that would be my backup opener
Mm,
for England. I mean, his numbers are insane, and he was in that SAA setup, and he scored runs, big runs at the
mm.
SAA setup. Peter Malan, average 120 the 4 day series.
But isn't Peter
He,
Malan's time out for the Proteas with Sardo there now? And obviously, if Sardo gets dropped, Aiden's
no,
going to get given another opportunity.
no, Aiden's out. Aiden is out for me. Aiden, the only position that Aiden is secure is T20s. That is the only position where he's 100%
Mm,
nailed on secure. He's hanging on to the ODIs just. I don't know how, but he is just. And the tests for me,
Because he can bowl, dude.
Samuel and Peter. I forget the age. You're the one that says that it's not the ageism. Forget the age. They could be there for the next 3 or 4 years. Easy. Anyway, your friend Josh Richards, 55 average.
Yes.
Really,
Oh,
really
man.
good. And
Scoring hundreds at the
he
Wanderers
had a
as
good
well.
season. He had scored runs all throughout. Our friend Brunty, average 42, also scored runs throughout the various formats. I thought his captaincy was most impressive throughout the format, particularly in that 4-day setup. When you
In
said
that final game was just amazing. In that game against, it was the Lions. You just had to go, oh no, they've got us.
You just thought the Lions were going to get it. I mean, they had miles ahead. They had all the guys there. I mean, Olivier's average is less than 15. Okay, he wasn't there in the final, but he's less than 15. Harmer, of course. Harmer's under 20. 44 wickets under 20. Just insane. And he showed there, okay, we've got good spinners. Fantastic, fine. But Simon Harmer, I'm sorry, domestically, Simon Harmer is the next best in South Africa. You've got Keshav, who deserves where he deserves to be. The next best is Simon. But in the red ball setup.
Yes,
I mean, he was just phenomenal.
And he's gonna, and this is why the Titans are going to be so dominant as the years go by, with Simon Harmer there having a spinner who can do. And I felt that's what the Dolphins were missing. They missed Keshav Maharaj a lot, and Subrian, because he was injured throughout the season. They missed those two because no, I get Grant Rudolphson, but I kind of felt like the Dolphins didn't have that spark, that zip in that bowling attack that they had in the previous season. Because I found their batting was okay-ish last season when they won it against the Titans, but it was their bowling that actually won them games. It opened up a lot of batting lineups, and it was Subrian, it was Mutusami, it was Maharaj, and then obviously they had their pacers to Pavilon, who was injured throughout the season. Batman is new, he's young, he's someone to watch out for. So I kind of felt that was the thing, and that's when my disappointment was for the season was the Dolphins. I think they really disappointed me. The Knights disappointed me a lot. They won a trophy, but it wasn't a great season. I think they peaked early with the T20, and they just looked flat all the way through. Jacques Snyman, I'm sorry, he started last year as a Protea in the T20s. It's far, far away from the setup now. But and what did you make of the newbies, Paul and Northwest? Northwest struggled in the longer format, but in the colored clothing, in the shorter formats, they were actually very good. Obviously, we saw Mutusami, we saw Wesley Marshall, Nicky van der Berg was actually quite good, and they were there and thereabouts. They had a lot of all-rounders, Dwayne Pretorius, Delano Potgieter in there. They didn't have like an out-and-out pacer, but it worked seemingly for them in that 50 overs. And it went down to a rained-out game for them to not actually get in the final, because that final could have been Northwest instead of the Lions in the ODI one-day cup.
Look, they were impressive. And you have to say they were impressive with some unfortunate circumstances. Having 2 coaches over the season, that would have changed the setup in the changing room. That would have, in any way, however small or big, would have changed the feeling about the changing room. So that would have been difficult to handle. I do think they took huge strides overall. And we had Sidran on here a few months ago, and he talked about the move. He talked about wanting to get more responsibility, and he took it with both arms. And in a difficult setup, in a place that was struggling, he really changed the way they play. I was hugely impressed overall with this performance, and the teams.
Yes,
we will get into it, but they do need to pick up some guys. They need to make some 2 or 3 good signings, and they could go to that next level and win something.
So obviously,
The
yes.
Knights were just the Knights were just horrible, just horrible. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's wrong, but they were just horrible.
Yeah.
At no
Yes,
time,
Tim.
I kept thinking they were going to do well, and they didn't.
Yeah. Just quick word on the Division Two sides. KZN England did really well. Southwestern Districts getting to that final did really well. The One Day Cup. Northern Cape winning the 4 day. Well, they did win 4 day. Yeah, I think they did. Did really
Yes.
well with all those with all those guys. Evan Riss, and Jonathan Van Dier and Rivaldo Munsami, and does this bode well for the new restructure that you're seeing some good performances out of Division Two? There were some teams that with new Mpumalanga, Limpopo, they really struggled, but the others did quite okay.
Yeah, look, I saw a lot of guys there, that could play Division One next year. I don't want to see a huge exodus though. I want the
Mm.
majority to stay there to make that division as strong as possible.
But,
I
mm,
don't mind one or two, but I'm a little bit worried from that context. Look, the Northern Cape are the best throughout
mm,
the formats for me. Their coach Mark Charlton, I
mm.
think, hugely impressive individual. Um, they got them playing really well, really good cricket, and they do have probably the best squad. Um, KZN England, they were impressive, and I think they deserved that last trophy towards the end.
Mhm.
Um, but they'll be a little bit disappointed that they didn't clean up the rest, because there are two or three really quality.
Tim, have I lost you? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it looks like I may have lost him. I'll send him back to backstage a little bit so we can get him through. But we're already at the end of our show. Just want to see if Tim's gonna come back. Okay, I think he's lost signal there. But one of the things that we wanted to get through was there will be exoduses and there'll be entries and exits in the off season. So please do watch out for that. We'll probably have a show just to talk about who's left and who's coming back in from the different teams. But that was our season review. Thank you very much for joining us. It's been a great season of cricket. We're going to continue with our podcast as we go along. Might not be as frequent, but we will do try and be as consistent as possible. So I know Tim would have said goodbye, but thank you very much to all of you who've supported us throughout the entire cricketing season. We'll be back again later on for we'll be back in the future with more interviews. We probably might even go into interviews up until South Africa go play in England in the summer, well, in the English summer and our deep winter. But thank you very much from myself and Paul, and I know Tim and Tim Delays as well. Goodbye, good night. Well, not good night, good afternoon, and lesale kakagiso.